Welcome back to your favorite podcast that's focused on purpose identification and living in the essence of your authenticity. Yeah, you know, Purpenthicity. This week we're joined by the remarkable William Glass, who's just an all-around just fantastic human being whose personal mission is to create systemic change within financial literacy. So you'll hear more about his story in creating Ostrich, which is a financial management and educational app, his story in interviewing entrepreneurs through his own podcast, Silicon Alley, and just who has a tremendous outlook in how he attacks life every single day. So we're really excited for this week's content and message. If you'd like our message, please hit the subscribe button below and enjoy the show.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Austin and I are back. You are listening to Purpenthicity. This is episode 21, presumably. 21, 22, somewhere in the early to mid-20s. We're really excited today. We have William Glass with us this morning. He is the CEO and co-founder of a financial literacy app called Ostrich. He is the podcast host of Silicon Alley, if you can see it on his shirt if you're watching via video. And he is also a profound lifelong learner. We're extremely excited to have him this morning. He has an incredible story that we're looking forward to him sharing. Will, I'd love you to, say hi to our audience and introduce anything that I might have missed.
Well, awesome. Yeah, Austin, Derek, thanks so much for having me. I'm really humbled to be asked to be here today and get to share my story. You guys are doing awesome work, and I love listening to Purpenthicity. And honestly, listening to your podcast, I hadn't really thought too much about what my purpose was until I started listening. So thanks for what you guys do. And happy to jump into my background here.
Well, you're clearly our best interviewee to date right now by starting off with that beautiful compliment. So thank you so much. And we are likewise a big fan of everything that you do, which we'll dive into later today, but thank you.
Cool. Absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of my background, I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama, grew up playing soccer, and my mom's side of the family are entertainers. So I did that as a kid, would do acting jobs here and there. And that's really what started to develop my relationship with money, which leads into what I do now with Ostrich. But before we get there, I ended up going to school at Rollins College, which is in Winter Park, Florida, a suburb of Orlando, studied international relations and was really involved in like community engagement and different things around campus. Through that, I ended up getting a Fulbright scholarship after I graduated and went to Thailand for a year. The number one goal after I graduated college was, can I live abroad for a year in case crap hits the fan in the US? That was my only goal right out of college. And then when I came back from that year in Thailand, I wanted to do something that would pay me for my time in a way that I felt my value was. And, getting a $40,000 a year job wasn't super exciting to me. And so I was between going in the commercial real estate or Gartner, which is how we met, Derek and Austin, and ended up going that route, ended up in sales, ended up having a really great mentor in Drew Jansen, who was my manager at the time, and then some great colleagues like Vince Perez, who we competitively, cooperatively competed to always try to hit higher numbers, which I know you guys can relate to is really important in sales, having that sort of colleague there that you're friendly with, but also that
was me and Austin.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Sell just a little bit more.
Just $1 more. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that was my experience there, and ended up moving into a management role pretty quickly. And then something changed in my personal life. Girlfriend and I had been doing long distance for a really long time, and it got to the point where we couldn't keep that up. And so I ended up moving up to New York and leaving Gartner to go work for an artificial intelligence company. During that whole time that I was at Gartner, I started developing this idea for Ostrich and what ultimately became Ostrich. And when I moved into the city, I ended up connecting with a close friend that I knew for 10 plus years, Andrew Holiday, and him and I sat down and were like, I think we've got something here. Let's give this thing a go. And so that's how we co-founded and started Ostrich. And about 6 months later, the podcast followed in tandem, sort of supporting that mission, but from a slightly different lens. And also a little bit of a passion project. And so that's the quick background.
So many questions.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was thinking, I want to start kind of with the Ostrich because it is your kind of like lovely background there. And I think the questions that I have around background, like I'm really curious to see how things about like how acting specifically like ties into like what you've done today. But let's start there. Like, can you give us a little bit of background just briefly, like what is Ostrich for our listeners? And then you mentioned that a little bit with your partner of how that came to be about, just like what was like the genesis or what you were ultimately trying to like accomplish in creating Ostrich?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ostrich is a personal finance app, and our focus is to improve financial well-being globally. And so what we have seen in the market is that there's a lot of great apps out there that help you automate things, that help you, get like Mint, Personal Capital, those types of apps that help prioritize, give you dashboards, great tools. But no one's really addressing the emotional side of money. And that's where we make most of our decisions. So if you think about whether you're going to go spend money or not, a lot of times it's like, am I going to go out with my friends? Am I going to go see them? And that's the decision. It's not, I'm going to go spend X amount of dollars at the bar or whatever that is. Right. And so no one's really addressed that. And that's really where our focus is on, is improving financial well-being by tackling that emotional side of money, the habits that ultimately lead to our success. Because I think pretty much everyone inherently wants to do better financially, unless you're already at the pinnacle of financial success, like, a Bill Gates or an Elon Musk probably doesn't care about that. But, for most of us, we want to do better for our families, for our children, for future generations. And so what gets in our way oftentimes is we don't have the right habits. We don't know exactly what we need to do to get there. And so that's what Ostrich does, is we help people build those habits through a game-like social community that puts learning, contextualize it around your goals. So if you're saving for a house, you've got a group and community of people that are also saving for a house, and you're working to that goal together. And while you're in that challenge, as you're hitting your down payment goals, you're getting injected with information about how to buy a house if you've never done it before. And so it's all about contextualizing that and then having that support, that community to help you get to where you want to go.
I think it sounds fantastic, Will. I personally have struggled with financial stupidness for my entire life, and it sounds like this is an app for people like me. Yeah,
I'm there with you.
No, I mean it's taken. I've had to go the long way, so it sounds like something like this. If I was, first of all, let me just be extremely clear: the Will Glass of being 22 years old and the Derek Cahill of being 22 years old are completely different individuals. You're traveling to Thailand in case America collapses. I don't even remember being 22 years old. I have no idea what I was even doing, but it certainly wasn't trying to protect myself from socioeconomic collapse. I don't even know if I knew what that word was. So obviously it's something really passionate that you're putting together, and we've gotten the chance to talk about it a little bit before, but you mentioned that the genesis of this, to Austin's point, was actually like forever ago when you were a kid. I feel like there's a story there.
Yeah, absolutely. So that definitely is. And as a kid, like I mentioned, the acting side. So my whole mom's side of the family, they're all entertainers. Grandfather was a comedian, traveled around the world, was on TV shows. Grandmother was a big band singer. My mom was an actress. Uncle's in public radio. The other uncle ran a rap label. Like that's,
Is it Jesse Itzler?
No, not Jesse Itzler. He wasn't a rapper. Mark Cerami. He ran Priority Records. He started Priority Records back in the day. So I ended up in that world. And so I was, as a kid, would do different commercials, things like that. And I remember distinctly, I did a Cracker Barrel commercial. It was a one-day shoot, and I got paid $2,700 for one day to get checked out of school to go like eat food and like look happy. And I was like, at the time I didn't comprehend. I didn't comprehend like what $2,700 was. Like the number didn't matter. Like you could have paid me $27 and I would have been just as happy. But my dad made a comment. He's like, this is pretty cool. And, credit to my parents too. They also opened up some retirement accounts for me. So I had a brokerage account. They bought Disney stock, things like that. And so, at 12 years old, I had a little bit of money in the bank and I owned some stocks, which, not many 12-year-olds do. But that right there planted a seed about time, like my relationship with money and time. And I think that's what ultimately led me, one, interested in sales further on in my career, of how can I leverage my time where I'm going to get the greatest compensation, because my time is valuable. And sales is one of those places where, you put in a little bit of extra work and your returns can be exponential. But that relationship isn't something that everyone has, right? I later on worked for a law school in Birmingham, where my mom's actually a professor there, and the dean there, I would work really hard and I was being paid hourly. And he was like, don't work so hard. Like, we're paying you hourly. And that concept to me was like, what? Like, I'd rather you just pay me a flat fee and get this thing done so I can go do something else with my day if this is the only work you have for the day, versus like hauling. I think they were moving. So it was like, I was literally moving furniture. I was like, I'd rather get this done and get it over with. And so those couple things started to develop my own relationship with money. And then, as you guys can attest, being at Gartner, you had folks that had $80,000 in student loan debt that would hit a big bonus and go out and buy a brand new truck. And then there were other people that had no student loan debt and would sock away every dime. And if you guys are familiar with Dan Rodigal, he was one of those people and retired at the age of, in his mid 30s, and is retired because he was part of that community where he was super frugal and wanted to develop his life around that. And so there's just all these different things that don't hit the mainstream media that we learn, like that we just don't, see. Typically, we aren't taught these financial concepts, financial literacy stuff. And so that's where the idea for Ostrich came from, is there's a better way, and people just don't know necessarily the best way to get to their goal. And so that's where the concept came from.
Yeah, I mean, speaking on behalf of the globe, it's difficult to know like where to put your money. Like, because I think for me anyways, there's always been this big struggle of like quick gains or long gains. And then this is so hard to find the long gains. It's like, what am I going to do? Sit here for 10 years? And where it's like, you're looking for the ones that are a little bit more volatile, but those are the ones that fuck people, because those ones can go down a lot more too. So that was the thing that I struggled with the longest. I would keep money. Well, first of all, if I ever had money in the past, I don't know what the hell I was doing with it. It certainly wasn't going into stocks. But when I finally started dabbling in it, it wasn't going into like long-term anything. It was like I was putting it in like Bitcoin. I was like, oh, that's it, I'm going to be rich. And then, it'd go down and I'd get scared and I'd sell it. So there was a period of time where all my money just sat in a savings account because I was so scared to use it. Where again, it sounds like this app is like, hey, go do this with it, or here's some ideas of what you can go do with your cash.
And I guess kind of what it hit me from that, it seems like there are a lot of apps that think like logically like what you should do with your money, but you almost seem to be taking like a kind of like a different approach. It's like there's two ways to be thinking, like what makes sense for your head and then what makes sense from like the heart, like the emotional decisions. Like nobody plans to spend like $250 and going out on a Friday night, but they say, oh, I'm going to go and meet up with my friends, and they go do that. And so that's what I was thinking about. You were kind of talking at that past story, but I guess my question is, was there like a specific instance, you mentioned like Dan wrote a call or like the $2,700 of where you were like, this emotional element is like an unmet need holistically from like all the other financial like apps out there around financial education. And, what about that moment made you say like, this is something that I think I can really, make a difference with?
Yeah. I don't know if there's a specific moment, but a series of moments. So when I was at Gartner, that's when I started writing the business plan. So I wrote the business plan in like 2017, and then we didn't start the company until 2019. So it took a couple years of percolating. But I think it started off more of like a rant, almost like what I wrote down. Like if I go back and look at like that business plan, it was just like, the financial system's broken. Like, when has anybody ever trusted their bank to be like, yeah, I trust that you're not going to do anything screwy with my money, or like,
you definitely have my best intentions in mind.
Exactly. And like financial services are one of the few things that are sold, not bought. And if you think about being in sales, right, people love to buy. Like, who doesn't love to go on Amazon and shop or do things like that? We love to buy, but people hate being sold to. And financial services is one of those things where it's so opaque. You don't know, like you can twist some numbers and everything sounds great. Austin, I know we talked about a little bit about the difference between whole life and term life insurance. And like, you can make whole life look real good.
Oh yeah. Real great.
And in reality, it doesn't. So I think that is where we were trying to draw a line, and also think about differentiating ourselves. What is it that is different, right? Like, Robinhood's great. It broke down access for a lot of people to invest. There's no longer trading fees, and the whole industry pretty much has dropped trading fees, which is great for consumers. But you also see instances during the pandemic where people are just going out and, like you said, Derek, going out and buying Bitcoin or investing in companies that have filed for bankruptcy.
Hurts.
Meaning hurts, right? Meaning that the stock is worthless and you see it just shooting up. And some people made money on that, but a lot of people lost money. And it's great, but you're almost giving like a loaded gun to a toddler. Like you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. Like,
Well, because people are price shopping, not like information shopping.
Exactly. And you can turn a quick few bucks, but can you do that consistently? And then do you also understand the day trading laws where you're probably your losses don't counteract your gains? Like you're going to pay taxes on all the gains that you made, even if you technically lost money during the same month, if you day trade within 30-day period. I didn't know this until I was talking to my mom who does taxes as well. And she was talking about this. I was like, I had no idea that's a thing. And so like, there's all these little things that we don't necessarily know. But if you think about your long-term goals, like that's what we struggle with, to your point, Derek, is we struggle with the short-term gratification versus the long-term. And so that's what the app was really focused on. And as we were looking out in the market, no one was taking that customer first approach. Every other app wants to hang on to your money. They want to link to your bank account. We don't do that. I don't care what bank accounts you use necessarily. I don't care, to hang on to your money, because as we said, with banks, our relationship changes. Are you going to inherently trust me when all of a sudden, for some reason, you can't log into the app because maybe the server's down or something happens and you want to get that cash out? Like, no. There's institutions that do that already. We'll point you to the ones that we believe are the best. But at the end of the day, we want to actually own the relationship with the customer. And that means putting their best interest first, which means not putting our bottom line first necessarily, in terms of hanging on to the cash, which is much easier to turn a profit if you think about a fintech app. So we're really thinking about the customer first. And that's why we're different in terms of the emotional side and being able to own that relationship, because I'm not hanging on to your money. I'm not holding it hostage. And Ostrich isn't linking to all your bank accounts and reading all of your financial data every, 10 minutes. So
that's really just an awesome premise, like even just spoken out very simply like that. And as you were thinking it kind of made me think, like, you have this really beautiful idea that's obviously driven to your passion. Have you given some time and thought about like what is like your longer term vision like with Ostrich? And I was almost thinking about that in the context of like, I think there's probably alignment there to purpose, but I won't put that in your mouth. You let me know. Yeah.
No, there definitely is, Austin. You definitely picked up on that. I want to be when anyone has a question about personal finance, the first place they turn to is Ostrich. It is think of it almost like the Google, like it's the hub. It's the place that you go. Like, I have a question, I'm going to go there, whether it's I need to connect with someone that can help me, like I need a financial advisor, whether it's I need a service, whether it's I just want to check in on how I'm doing or get ideas. Like, the first place you turn to is Ostrich. And so that's the vision. And one of the cool things is by not linking to your bank account and by not providing financial services, we can actually serve a global audience, which a lot of these other companies can't, right? They can only, due to regulations and regulatory concerns, which make a ton of sense. But we actually have the ability to help everyone and connect everyone, which enables us to own that relationship and become the place that people turn to when they have a question. And so that's the vision. And I think when you were talking about purpose, for me personally, something that's important is being able to help others, but in a way that systematically changes something. And so for me, that's systematically changing the way that we deal with finances, the relationship that as a global community we have with financial institutions, where the power is shifted to the consumer. And so that for me is purpose alignment when it comes to Ostrich.
I think that's almost kind of like a mic drop moment right there. Like, and we've talked to a fair number of people kind of around purpose. The thing that jumps out to you is like, okay, I want to help people, but like a systematic change. So like almost like fundamentally changing the way that people's relationship is with, I guess, finance in this particular way. So it's a beautiful, wonderful vision. So thank you for sharing that with us. I guess my kind of question from that is like, what was the desire, particularly in your purpose, to like have systemic change? Because I mean, like your app, like without doubt, can like help people. But what is like alignment with like your purpose to say like, I want to like change this like for the better, like forever?
Yeah, I think so. I loved history growing up. Like, history was one of my favorite classes. I just really, really enjoyed it. And I took senior year, I took an elective that was AP European history. And I had a teacher there who really like dove deep into some of the things that happened over in Europe and some of the key figures that like systematically changed what we do. And so for me, the term Renaissance man, I know it's definitely like probably old school, old term, probably not the right term today. I don't know what the modern terminology would be, but that's always been something that like was interesting. I was like, you know, like a Leonardo da Vinci that was an artist, a painter, a sculptor, a thinker, an inventor, like that is interesting to me. And that is someone that when I think about role models like that change the trajectory of ideas, of thought, that is interesting to me. And I think that was probably one piece of it. You know, as I'm talking, I guess like the people that I admire and look up to have been those people that really changed society. And if you're going to put so much work and effort into something, like why not improve things for the better at a systematic level? Like nothing wrong with helping people one-to-one, because I think that that's really, really important too, and that those can lead to systemic change. But why not shoot for changing an entire structure, an entire system, if you can?
That I don't know how that hit you, Derek, but that's like amazing, and I don't think that's ordinary. Which is why one of the reasons I was so excited to kind of ask you that question and learn a little bit more about it, because you don't meet people every day who's like, you know, I want to systemically change things like for the better. You know, a lot of people like want to help, and I think just an observation, most people's purpose is in helping some people in some form, even if it's like helping themselves. But to think about something that changes everyone for the better is noble, and it's really inspiring to hear. So, you know, I'll kudos to you for there, Derek. It looked like you had something popping up, but I feel like I had to say that before we moved on.
Well, it's just cool. It's like change at scale. Like you're not trying to influence one person, 2 people, 10 people. It's like, no, I'm going to go for everyone. I'm going to change everyone. I'm going to change financial literacy for everyone. So question for you is, I know like some of the other financial apps there are, there's, well, actually I can't think of any of the names now, but they rely on that like personal banking information for like almost like accountability. What's like Ostrich's way of like keeping everyone accountable, or is it just self-driven? Like if I'm going to be part of the community, one of the prerequisites is like don't lie.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously a great point, something that we've thought about. For us, like what's the point of lying? You know, like if we get to a level where people want to come onto the app and lie, we're in a good place, right? Like that means there's a reason that you want to lie. And so we're relying on that community. So for example, like let's say all 3 of us are in a challenge, and I'll just use that down payment one. We're saving for a house, an investment property, whatever that is. I'm not going to see how much you're saving, right? I'm not going to see how much Austin, how much Derek is saving, because that's personal. But what I'll see is if you hit your goal, or did you at least make progress? And so that's where the accountability comes in. It comes from the community of people that are also in your network in that same challenge, that are working towards the same goal. So it's like, hey, like I saw that Austin's already hit his goal, and it's we're like halfway through the month. Like that's awesome. Like, man, I need to get my ish together and I need to go transfer that money to my savings account. Or, you know, I see that Derek's missed the goal 2 months in a row. Like I'm going to reach out and be like, hey, Derek, like what's going on, man? Like, you know, and things happen. So the purpose isn't to like 100% always meet your goal, but it's just to always be working towards that and be cognizant of it. Cause I think there's and Derek, I was listening to the podcast that you did a couple episodes back, where you were talking about this challenge, personal challenge that you did, where, and I can't remember what it was, but it was like
75-day hard.
Yeah, 75-day hard. And you said you got 7 days into it, and then you're like, it's done. And like you got derailed, life happened, and like that's okay. But if I could get you back on day 10 and you start working towards it, yeah, so what? You didn't do the full 75 days, but like you still did more than you wouldn't have otherwise. And so that's where the social accountability comes in, the smart notifications that are reaching out to remind you to hey, transfer that money into your savings account, or you know, X, Y, and Z. So it is reliant on the individual, but that's also purposeful to help you build those habits. Because if you're not cognizant of it, and like all of a sudden the auto savings feature doesn't work, and 10 months goes by and you've never thought about it, that's also not a good thing. So we do recommend automation because I think it does help, but also the cognizant ability to recognizing that, hey, I've taken this action. And that's where the habit building comes in.
Yeah, and it sounds cool because it sounds like it's income agnostic because it's goal based. So whether I'm buying $1 million house or a $200,000 house, maybe my cohort will be a mixture of all of those people because it's goal based. 50% of whatever I want is still a goal. Doesn't matter if it's 100 grand or 10 grand.
Exactly. And that's the purpose, is to really get people that are, it doesn't matter, right? If you spend $250,000 and you only make 200, like, what's the difference between that person and someone that makes $50,000 and spends, over, 75, right? There's not too much of a difference there, right? They're still spending more than you earn. So how can we bring people to, regardless of income level, but get the right habits that lead to those financial successes?
Yeah,
So.
no, I love it because to this point I've had to do this. This is real for me because this is I'm just like over the last year and a half, 2 years, like learning how to manage money appropriately. Like, I don't know, I actually don't know where, if I ever even posted it, but like I bought a new truck in 2019 and I loved it. It was my favorite truck, and technically I could afford it, but a couple months ago in the midst of a pandemic, it's like I was paying with insurance and everything on there, probably like $750 a month on a vehicle that I wasn't really using. And I went and sold it and took $750 a month back into my life. And I made a few grand on it by selling it to the dealership because I had some equity in it. And I felt like 22-year-old William Glass in that moment. I was like, I've got this shit together. But it's like, it's so hard for normal people. And I'm one of them. Like, just, I feel like I'm a little bit more like disciplined with my money. Like, I'm not always looking for, I don't have any flashy anything, but that truck was like the one thing. And I like reckoned with myself to go ahead and push it away.
Yeah. And I guess, Derek, off that, the thing that I do want to stress, because I think a lot of times when we start talking about personal finance, it can get into that like super frugal mindset. Like, I want you to spend money on the things that make you happy. So if that's spending a ton of money on your kids because you're able to spend time with them, then like you should do that. Right. And, I think that's the one sort of thing when it comes to personal finance, people get a little down a rabbit hole and you can almost go pendulum swing too far the other way. So,
and then you have way too much money.
Well, not that you have way too much money, but you don't use it. Like, what's the purpose? If I had, I don't know, like, think about it. Like, can Bill Gates ever spend all the money that he has? No, right? Like, if you've got over $500 billion, good luck trying to spend that. Do you think that like making another 200 billion is going to make you any happier? Absolutely not. Do you think losing 200 billion is going to make you any happy or any less happy? Probably not, because it doesn't affect your day to day. But you do need to use money to enjoy life and do the things that you need to do. So there's that balance, but it's about not spending money on things that you don't care about. So if a truck isn't important to you because you don't need it, and you'd rather spend $750 on your kids because it creates memories, it creates things that you're going to love, it helps them learn lessons because you get to take them to, I don't know, whatever, ball games or whatever it is that you want to do with them. Like, that is worth every penny and every time. So
yeah. I mean, it goes back to what you're saying. It's just like helping people to build the habits. And then like once you have the habits down, you give people agency and control of how it is that they want to use their funds versus almost being like a victim of whatever financial education that you grew up with, that you inherited with your family or that you learned. No, it's really empowering. At least that's what I'm kind of taking away from it.
Yeah.
So I guess I was kind of curious, in spirit of, you said the word Renaissance man earlier, in the spirit of true Renaissance man, even drawing back to the acting, which I'm still putting a pin in, is you seem to have this really beautiful vision and purpose of wanting to create systemic change within, financial literacy and just how people's relationship with money. So I was curious. I know you have, the Silicon Alley podcast, which takes a little bit more of the entrepreneurial focus. I'd love to just to better understand from you is, how that venture came to be about and how you use that tool to also support, your larger purpose.
Yeah. So one of the things that I guess is a trait of mine is that, like, if I talk about something for long enough, I get to the point where I've either got to do it or I've got to shut up and stop talking about it. And the podcast was partly that, where it's like, man, it would be cool to do a podcast, and like, oh, I should do this, and oh, I don't necessarily know what would it be focused on. And then thinking how it could tie into Ostrich. So yes, it's focused on entrepreneurship, which is really important selfishly because I want to learn from other entrepreneurs, other top performers, other people that are building businesses, building brands, building things, because like selfishly, I want that knowledge. Like I want to know what mistakes you've made so I can try to avoid them, or I want to know what helped lead to this success or that success so that I can apply it. So that's one aspect. I guess when it came to the podcast and the desire to do that. And then the second is bringing in some of the finance. So entrepreneurs have a slightly different relationship to money than your average Joe, because it's not just personal, but you've also got to manage your business finances and think about those two in tandem. And not to say that entrepreneurs are any better at managing money, because I think that sometimes entrepreneurs are worse because they will, go all in and they're big risk takers. And Derek's raising his hand there, big risk takers. And what I've noticed is most entrepreneurs' big mistakes are spending way too much money on a marketing thing that had no shot of ever winning or working, or not validating an idea. So it was kind of blending the two, where one, I want to learn from people so that I can apply it into the business that we're doing, connect with people, network with top performers. And then two, I want to ask some of these financial questions, like what's the best investment that you've made? What's the dumbest money mistake that you've made? Because we all make them. And I think that's the other piece too, is that while I'm sitting here talking about personal finance and, making these great decisions, building habits, I am far from perfect. And I make dumb mistakes all the time and have a track record of that, but it's learning from those. And again, working towards those goals long term. So that's sort of how the podcast blended in with Ostrich and why I just got to a point where it's like, I got to do this thing. It makes sense. I've got the reason behind it, the mission, and I've got the focus. So like the only thing that's stopping me from doing it is my decision to do it. So.
Well, I've got two questions. A little bit, and we might have to come back. I think I might be kidnapping the stream that you're on, Austin, but you just brought up a good point. I have two questions. One of them is, what is your best investment? And the 1A to that is what made it the best investment?
Yeah. So the best investment I made was actually writing the largest check I've ever written and helping a family member. So and this was after I had left my job. So I'd started Ostrich. I had, a set amount of cash saved up. I was going to invest in the business, and something happened with a family member where they were in a situation where the only way out of it was to write a check. And I had to make the decision of, well, I could invest this in Ostrich and we could use that and probably accelerate our growth, or I can go invest in this relationship with someone that I deeply care about and that I love and that needs this more than I do. And I let go. And I was like, you know what? I'm writing this check, and I do not regret that. I would do that every day of the week. I would do that, make that decision again. And while that has made building Ostrich more challenging because we have less capital to do it, I have less runway now. It was the best investment that I've made because it was in a relationship that I will forever have and is really important to me. And it was the largest check that I've ever written, biggest investment, and it was half the money that I'd had saved up for Ostrich. And yeah.
That's powerful, man. I love that.
Super powerful. I mean, when you talk about the emotion, because logically it sounds like that doesn't make sense, right? But the emotional element ultimately led you down this path that was super gratifying in alignment with what you wanted to do. So, without getting too depth into your personal, decisions
Sure.
and matters here, but can you talk about the emotional element of, you've been very focused about this vision that you have and this business that you want to build, and almost doing something that might not directly support that. So I guess, just more of the reasoning in terms of why you wanted to invest specifically in the relationship.
Yeah. Well, I think one is that this was a decision that I made. It wasn't this person coming and asking me for the money. So it was, and I was actually very upset that they didn't share the struggle that they were going through sooner. But, I completely get it when you end up in a situation and money is the only thing that'll solve it. And it's tough. It's emotional. You're going through all the different things. I get why. So it was a decision that I made. And I think that was one important thing, is it wasn't someone saying, hey, I need money. Mm-hmm. The other is when I think about success and my purpose, if I can't help the people that are closest to me and I have the ability to do that, who am I? Yeah. I would have lost myself. Man. The other thing that happened when I made that decision is that my relationship with money changed. I didn't have the healthiest relationship because I was so focused on continuing to accumulate, which is an important factor. But if I couldn't spend it in a way that aligned with my purpose and what was important to me and the people that I love and care about, then I don't know. Like, just I'd be very disappointed in myself, and I don't think I would be able to look myself in the mirror and recognize.
Yeah, it sounds like it was like a
there.
reality check for you.
Exactly. And so it was hard, but it was also one of the easiest decisions at the same time that I've made. Because when you frame it in that context,
Yeah, right. It almost,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what am I going to do? Not support the people that I love?
Well,
Like,
I think it's also a valid
Uh,
point of, we've been on the topic of like emotional spending or emotional finance, but I think if you go a layer deeper, is cool. Obviously, there's some elements where you can make an emotional decision, but is it constructive or destructive? And picking which lane you're going to go down before making that emotional decision. So although I'm sure it was partly logical, like hey, all right, I see the path forward. If it was just like, oh, this could happen again next month too, you'd be like, I don't know if I can do this every month. But it was still a constructive decision. So I think that's an important line to draw.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a one-time thing, and it solved the problem, and we moved on, sort of thing. But I like that, Derek, and I think I'm going to steal that. The destructive constructive. I think that's a great way to frame it, because we're emotional beings. We're not going to change our emotional decision making, but if we can build better habits and we can align, as you said, with the things that support who we are, our purpose, our authentic selves, then that's a win.
Just flip it, call it destructive constructive. We can abbreviate it to DC. DC's Derek Cahill.
Oh, something happened there.
Oh, there it is.
So, second question that I had, and I might have to challenge you to think of a different story, because the way I'm going to frame this, what's the scariest thing you've ever done with money? Like maybe biggest risk, we could call it, but something in that vein.
Scariest thing. So, I mean, I bought interest in real estate. As I said, I was between going down being a commercial real estate broker, and more so because I wanted to learn and invest versus I wanted to go sell real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd say I bought a rental property. It was, I lived in it to start with. It was a duplex in Fort Myers, Florida. And I would say that was probably the I guess, most challenging outside of that. Because of all the unknowns, right? Like, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go buy a house. Then you're like, oh, well, wait, well, there's an inspection. There's like what about insurance? Am I actually going to be able to make money on this? I've got to rent it out. I've got to clean it out. Am I going to manage this myself? Like, am I going to start getting phone calls at 2 a.m. about broken toilets? Because that doesn't sound like fun, but it also aligns with where I want to go, and like what happens with taxes. What if there's a hurricane? Like, you just start thinking of all the what ifs. And so while I think that was one of the smartest financial decisions that I made, it was also one of the most challenging, because it was something that I'd never done before. And it was at the time, that's the most debt that I've ever taken on. And now I owe all this money to a bank for 30 years, which doesn't sound like fun. So I'd say that was the hardest decision making. And I looked at properties for like over a year, and eventually someone came to me, the real estate agent that I've been working with was like, hey, here's an off market property, because I'd been looking and she knew exactly what I wanted. And I was like, the numbers make sense. I'm just going to buy it. And like, I stopped thinking beyond that point. And once I signed the contract, then I was like, oh crap, what did I do? And then all those other fears and everything else came to pass. So I'd say that was the most challenging thing that I've done with money.
Do you still own that duplex?
I still do, yes. So
awesome.
Now I have full-time property management. It does pretty well. Like, I cash flow on it. Like, I'm very happy with that decision, and someone else is paying equity in a mortgage for me. So I've got to be happy for that.
Yeah. I just sold my single family house that I had rented out, but that was never the plan to rent it out anyways. We had moved to Texas, but I got a property manager too, because I had done the tenant thing, and it's not fun.
Nope.
Someone called me once and said the hot water wasn't hot enough. I was like, my man, I don't know what to tell you. Is it warm? Like, yeah, that's well, even right there in that story, man, is another one of those like tough emotional decisions, but again, like constructive or destructive, because like buying that, maybe not as like, I assume you were like single then, or at least you were so you weren't going to be living with a significant other, you weren't married, starting a family. But that's one of the things that comes up a lot when buying it for, like, it's such a financially long-term sound decision to go buy a multifamily property and live in one side of it and have someone else pay your mortgage, even if it's for a year, 2 year, like short term. But people can't get over that, like, white picket fence, my house, I want the house. But it's such like a good thought process and decision to go buy yourself a duplex and live in half of it, and then you go move into your single family house, and that mortgage is partly covered.
Exactly. I mean, that's if you can do it that way. But obviously, everyone's priorities, what makes them happy, is different. So you've got to balance that aspect too. But yeah, you're spot on there, Derek.
Yeah, I was just thinking, is just the thought behind it constructive or deconstructive in terms of even like that example? But and, even as you were just sharing this, Will, one of the things I really enjoy about your podcast and just talking to you about money is that you said it earlier. You don't talk from like a pedestal. It's a very, very safe place to kind of talk about the great things that you've done with money, some of the maybe not so great things, the biggest lessons learned that you've had about it, which is, I think is really cool and really endearing. And I imagine is probably an element within Ostrich in itself. So while we're, I guess, closing in on the topic of money, man, what is your relationship with money now? I mean, it seems like it's changed and you have a renewed kind of vision on this, given your experiences with it and this big decision that played into it. But that was kind of what was jumping out to me.
Yeah. It's ironic because the more that I've focused on Ostrich and talking about finance and money, the better my relationship has come in terms of not focusing on it personally as much, if that makes sense. Like when you go start a business, you don't have income coming in. So it naturally change. It naturally has to change. You've got to watch what you're spending. You've got to, things like that really alter your relationship. And like I said, I think that decision to support a family member and write half of what I had saved was super crucial in that, and getting over the, like, my worth is tied to my net worth, because it's not.
That's powerful.
It's being able to support the people that I love, that I care about, and work towards that purpose of systemically changing the world for the better. And for me, that's through personal finance and helping other people identify their relationship with money, because we all have one. Whether you realize it or not, you have a relationship with money, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, whether you don't have any, like you still have a relationship with money. And the more that we can just accept that, recognize that, and be aware of it, the better off I believe we will be. And I think that's the key. So when I think about my relationship with money, it's just being cognizant of it, being aware of it, and using it to serve my purpose and support the people that I love and care about.
I love that, using it to serve your purpose, and not just something that you're brushing under the rug. It's like being present to like the power that this does have in relationship to your purpose or to your larger ambitions or your day to day. That's
Exactly.
It's I think like the core is it should serve you, not you serve it.
Boom.
There it is.
Oh, I got the point.
Derek's got it.
Yeah.
Derek's got it. My man.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I guess the other thing to say is that I'm obviously come from a very privileged place. And I think that's important to note too, right? Like I was never worried about where my next meal is going to come from, and like have my family had financial troubles at times, absolutely, but never at a point where I thought I was going to be homeless or not have something to eat. So I think that that's another really important thing to note. And when you're in those types of situations, like money is really important, right? You've got to have it to have a baseline. So I think that is one thing that I think is really important to share with the audience, and recognize your own privileges, whether you've got them or lack of them, if you are in a place where you don't have those same opportunities.
I think that's a really important point, because to your point, Will, not everybody starts on the same spot in terms of just finances, like how much money that you have, or financial education. But I think also another thing in that same vein is that where you start doesn't have to define of like where you finish. And if to your point, building those habits and it might not happen overnight, but putting yourself in a position where money can serve you, it can be extraordinarily empowering, and everybody does have the ability to do that. Something that's been really present just throughout our conversation today to me, Will, is that one, you're just a tremendously passionate and just an awesome human being. And it made me kind of think, what elements of yourself are you really present to that you think best assist you or service your larger purpose of creating systemic change?
Great question. So we talked about, and Derek kind of kicked it off as being a lifelong learner. I think that that's a really important piece, is curiosity and that learning aspect, whether it's reading books, whether it's talking to people with unique stories, whether it's traveling and meeting different people and cultures and understanding what their values are and how they structure their lives and social safety nets and all those types of things. Listening to podcasts, all that stuff, I think is really one of the things that serves me and that I focus on is just trying to absorb as much knowledge as possible, because I think you can learn something from pretty much everyone, every situation, whether it even just reinforces something that you already know or completely changes. And you've got to be open to learning and understanding to catch those things. And so I'd say that's probably one of the key things that has served me, is just always being curious.
Look, that's a superpower. Because I think a lot of people say that it's like, oh, I want to be a natural learner and everything that I do leads to like a collective better version of me. But I think to actually do that day in and day out and actually be true to that value is a completely different conversation. Is there anything maybe that you've noticed about your experience or upbringing that's allowed you to just kind of more embrace that and really like embody that virtue?
So I think, my parents did a good job of always allowing me to explore my interests. I attended a Montessori school through 6th grade, and like it really fell off. There was only 7 of us in our graduating class, but like part of that structure is that you follow your own natural curiosity and you like master the certain skills. So one of the things that peeves me with public school education is that like you get something wrong, you get shown the answer, and then you move on. Like make me go back and figure it out until I've gotten them all right. And that was one thing that I really took away from Montessori, as well as like once I got my work done, I could go explore anything that I wanted to in the classroom. So, we would go learn what all the president's favorite colors were because we had a little like card game and we'd play that, like, random stuff like that. And so I think it started there. And then also my parents fostering that, allowing me to go act, to go play soccer, to be athletic and creative at the same time, and pushing me to use both right and left brain.
That's interesting. Well, I'm actually reading a book right now. I can't remember the name of it right now. Obviously, you guys have got me on like my morning where my brain's not functioning on remembering things, but it talks exactly about that, where it actually referenced school, where they were polling teachers, and the teachers that would give the answer got really high results, but over time those students not failed per se, but like they lagged significantly. Where if students were challenged to go get the right answer, they became better learners and better thinkers. So I mean, it was really interesting that you just brought that up, because it's like, it makes me reflective. Like, am I doing that for my kids? Am I just, if Lenny gets something wrong, am I like, oh, you asshole, it's this, or am I pushing it? I don't do that, but, or am I pushing him to learn? I'll get you the book after if it would be something that you'd enjoy reading. But I
Absolutely.
thought a good way to close this out would be, I've referenced a few times like 22-year-old Derek, 20-year-old Derek. So we probably grew up in very different households. So when we talk about like coming from the word like privilege, I didn't. So my family was the black sheep. My family was the people that were asking the other people for money, and like the micro money, like, oh, I just need $100. I just need, the like toxic ask for money. So it wasn't until like my mid to even late 20s that I kind of got myself stable. I mean, it was a journey from like 24, it compounded, but we were on this topic of like, some people aren't in the position to make wise decisions with money because they don't have any, or they don't have the literacy. What advice would you give to 20-year-old Derek that didn't have a foundation for what to do with money and didn't have a career yet, hadn't gone to a great school? What advice do you give someone like just starting?
Yeah, I think the first thing is go find people that do have that experience and surround yourself with those people. You hear that trope a lot, that you're the collection of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And it really is true. Like, and the great thing about the world that we live in now is that if you physically can't go be near those people, especially in the time of COVID and a pandemic that we're going to be working through for a long time, like you can find those people online in social media circles, on, podcasts. Like, surround yourself with those people and the people that are thinking that way. Cause it takes time to develop that mindset and learn those things. I mean, I don't know how many times I had to, like, when it came to real estate stuff, like I've read so many books and listened to so many podcasts, and I still will be like, shoot, what's an IRR again? An internal rate of return? Like, I don't even know how to calculate that, because, it's just not something that you're learning. So get around those people, and you'll probably have to hear topics or things like that again. But one, follow your interests when it comes to finances, and find those people, whether it's online or physically, and surround yourself with them. And I think that's the best place to start. And
I love that.
The great thing is that people that are on the trajectory that you want to go want to support and help other people. As you guys have said, pretty much everyone, I think innately, part of the purpose is to help serve other people and giving back, sharing knowledge. People love to be able to share their knowledge, right? Like, I love being able to be here and share what I know. I don't know everything. That's pretty obvious.
I would say, but
but the purpose is, like, I enjoy sharing what I do know, and hope that someone will take at least one valuable nugget away from this and be able to apply it in their life. So
yeah, it's funny that was your feedback, because earlier in the podcast I wrote, Ostrich is like a better group of friends.
I love it. Yeah, exactly. Surround yourself with the right flock.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So anything that you'd want to, anything about Ostrich that we haven't covered that you'd want people to know about? Are you live? Is it free? And if it's not live, when does it expect to go live?
Yeah, so it is free. So yeah, you can download that. It's not live yet. We are in a private beta. So if you are interested, though, you can get on the wait list, and you can go to getostrich.com, and there'll be a link on there where you can drop your email, and we'll add you to the list. So we're in testing, and the one thing I've learned when it comes to software is that if I give you a hard date, it definitely will change. So I'll just say, in the coming weeks, we hope to move into that public beta. There's a couple little things that we've got to get working properly to ensure that the experience is what we want it to be for people. So
got it, man. Well, you have a super impressive story, man. Obviously, it was a pleasure having you on, and we'll, I'm sure, talk soon. But you guys heard it from Will. Go to getostrich.com, get on his email waitlist. I literally am going to do that, because I'm curious about the thing. There's still so much I need to learn about money, and this is, throughout this podcast, man, it's like, this is what I want to learn, and the people that I want to surround myself with. And I'm not 20 years old trying to learn everything. I'm 32 years old with a career and a house and a pool. So it's like, it fits many purposes.
Well, that's the cool thing, man. It's like, no matter where you are on your journey, you can always get smarter or wiser, or, tweak your foundations of money to put you in a position to better serve you. So the app is just, the whole idea is just, it's really inspiring. I love the aspirational vision, Will. And yeah, man, it's truly been an honor to have you on our show. This has been really, really cool and really informative.
Well, thank you guys. I'm humbled to be able to be here and be a part of the Purpenthicity audience and talk to them, and as well as, be here and speak with you guys. The one thing that I do want to share, because we've talked about all the highlights, and I think it's really important to share the lowlights, is that I've got my lows too when it comes to all this stuff. Like, if we would have had this conversation last week, my mind, I was in a low point, where I was questioning all of my priorities, all those types of things. And it's through those that you get to those. So I really wanted to share that, because, we're obviously talking about all the great things, and these conversations also realign me with my purpose. But when I get stuck in my own head, like, I'm just like everybody else. And it's like, how do I get out of that funk? So
man, that's such a good point.
Entrepreneur's curse, man. I mean, shit, dude. No, I mean, last week I said the same thing about Wicked Bold. It's like, am I even doing the right things? Like, am I even on the right path? What am I even doing?
Yeah, and it's like, what do you make those low moments mean about yourself? It's like something bad happens. You're like, oh, well, do I have the idea anymore? Am I valuable? It's so that's definitely
stupid.
I know. Well, when you think about that, and it's like community, like, can be so important to just like help uplift you when you are in kind of those lows, which you mentioned kind of in the app. And I was even just thinking from just, fellow content creators, it's like, well, dang, like, I didn't know Will like had like a low week last week. And it's just like, even just like the grander vision there of like, how can we build that, from our collective communities to be further in support of each other. That's something that's going to be ringing in my mind long after this podcast. But I think that's a really important point, Will. On this journey, whether you're entrepreneurial or not, there are inherent like highs or lows, man. It's not always sunshines and rainbows. And it's like, how do you get yourself through those? And here's the thing, it's like typically not always like by yourself, right? It's about the people who are around you and who are supporting you and who surround you to help get you through it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you again, guys, for letting me be here. And this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.